Section 3, we're looking at solving some other kinds of equations that are not linear, not quadratic, and specifically we're going to focus on fractions and radicals, square roots. So let's start by looking at the fractions. In this one, you notice we've got denominators, and we want to first off recognize the numbers that do not work. 1 divided by 0. There is no such thing as 1 divided by 0. So x cannot be a 0. And whatever we get as an answer, if it's a 0, it's not the right answer. So that's basically all that recognizing that does for us, is tell us if our answer is going to make any sense. We could check our answer anyway, but that's going to be a lot of trouble with fractions. Now, the common denominator, and again, this is not something to struggle with. You just take everything that you see in the bottom and make sure you list it. There's an x, there's a 5, there's a 2, there's another x, but we already have x listed, so we don't list it twice. So this would be the common denominator. Now, I don't need to know that that's a 10x. I just need to know it's a 2 and a 5 and an x. So if we multiply both sides by that, on the left-hand side, when we multiply, it'll be 2 times 5 times x times 1. On the right-hand side, we have to use the distributive property. When we multiply 2 times 5 times x times 1, then 2 times 5 times x times 3, and then cancel things that will cancel. In the first one, we've got an x in the top and the bottom. That will cancel. In the second one, we've got a 5 in the top and the bottom. That will cancel. And in the third one, we've got a 2 and an x. That will cancel. Now we're left with a nice linear equation. Subtract 15 from both sides. Divide by 2. And that's our answer. Here's another fraction one. We need to multiply both sides by the common denominator. The number that doesn't work in this one would be x equals 1. We multiply by x minus 1 on both sides. The left-hand side, we use the distributive property. Right-hand side, cancel things that will cancel. In the first term, x minus 1 top, x minus 1 bottom. In the last term, x minus 1 top, x minus 1 bottom. 5 times x minus 1 will multiply out. And then we can finish solving a nice linear equation. So that's the process of solving fraction equations. Let's take a look at this equation. Common denominator, y minus 3. We multiply the right side by y minus 3, and the y minus 3's will cancel. On the left-hand side, when we multiply by y minus 3, we just get y minus 3 times x. We can multiply that out. We need all of the y's to be on the same side. So we're going to subtract y from both sides. We're going to add 3x to both sides. Left-hand side, we're going to factor out the y. That would leave x minus 1. And then we're going to divide by the x minus 1. Now there's the y for that one. Let's look at the square root problems. The idea of solving square roots is to square both sides when the square root is a single term on the left or right. Here we square both sides. The square of a square root just removes the square root, and x squared is x squared. We gather all terms together on one side. We can solve that like we did in the previous section. Quadratic equation. Factor, set each term equal to 0, and solve. Now the kicker is when we're solving square root equations, we want to be sure and check our answers. If we use the negative 10, we see that that's not exactly right. 10 is not equal to negative 10. So that cannot be an answer. When we try the 2, it works fine. So that's the only answer. Here's another one. Remember what I said on the previous problem. We don't want to square both sides now. We want to get all the terms together on one side that do not have square roots and leave the square root by itself on the other side. If we move both terms around, move this one to the right, this one to the left, we get x minus 5 on the left, and then the square root of 2x plus 5 is by its little self. Square both sides. Now x minus 5 squared you want to be careful with. We practiced that back in chapter 1. That's x squared minus 10x plus 25. We have a quadratic equation. Get everything together on one side, factor, or use the quadratic formula, and then check your answers. If we check the 10, we see that it works fine. If we check the 2, that does not work. So that's how we solve the radical equation.